Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our Workbench and Miley Cyrus Masterclass today. My name is Jessica Lynn. I'm a co-founder and partner at Workbench. We are an enterprise software VC fund based here in New York City, and we lead seed rounds and enterprise startups throughout the country. The number one thing we work on with our founders is enterprise sales and go-to-market all day, every day. And that is why we launched this Enterprise Operator Masterclass series with operators from top enterprise software companies sharing their most tactical playbooks with us. And as everyone is kicking off a new year in today's very challenging market, we know the number one thing top of mind for all early stage enterprise startups is how do we close new sales? Now, in the past, when with bank features alone could have gotten a deal done, it is more critical than ever that all sales conversations must lead with value and business outcomes. But the question is, how? And this is where Kiran Narsu comes in. Kiran is a longtime revenue leader here in New York City at both large enterprise companies and fast growth startups. And we estimated that he has probably been on what feels like 1 million sales calls in his lifetime. And he now close. And he now works closely with early stage startups. And what Kiran has seen is that there are some very small but significant tweaks that can, quite frankly, make or break your demo and discovery calls with prospects. And so on this masterclass, Kiran is going to be laser focused in dissecting the most common blockers he hears on sales calls. And we'll share with you the top tactics you and your teams can do to immediately unlock urgency and improve your ability to book the next meeting. So get ready to take lots of notes. We will post this recording afterwards on our blog, and please do drop in your questions and chat throughout, and we'll leave plenty of time at the end to discuss. And so with that, please join me in welcoming Kiran Narsu.
Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to be here with you. I'm just going to get myself set up with the sharing of the screens, and hopefully you guys can all see that. Wonderful registration list. Is an incredible list of participants. So thank you all for taking the time out of your days to join this session. And as Jess said, please make it interactive. If you've got questions, please pop them up in the chat, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. So just as a quick setup, you know, I feel very passionate about this because at the end of the day, I think I work with, as Jess said, I work with a lot of early stage startups. And I think if we establish this sort of dynamic early on in the history of our organization and in the maturity of our organization, I think it will set a good sort of foundation for your growth. But that is, everybody in your organizations really needs to be a pro at discovery. That doesn't mean you're putting on engineers on the sales front line every day of the week. But fundamentally, if we have a curious team that is really striving to understand what are the business challenges that we can address with this prospect, then we're taking a step in the right direction. And I also want to underscore another point that I hear a lot, and that is discovery is not, in my opinion at least, not a step in the sales process, but it is a discipline. We're still discovering things with customers we've signed and implemented that they've gone live 6 months ago. So it might be new people, it might be new functional challenges in the business, what have you. So I want to really emphasize that point. The third point I really want to make sure as a guiding principle is, as sellers, our ability to earn respect is directly proportional with our ability to demonstrate really, genuine curiosity and a desire to understand the challenges that our prospects are going through. They're going through them. We just have to get really good at pulling at those threads, and we'll talk a lot about that. And that leads to really good rapport, and that creates the foundation for a very powerful sales site. You're not going to win them all, but you'll certainly set yourself up for success in more cases if you're able to drive that rapport with the customer. And then fundamentally, one of the most common things that I see a lot is the sellers really sort of spending a lot of time talking about themselves, their work, etc. The more we can make ourselves recede into the background a little bit, I think the better we'll be, because then we can make front and center the customer's challenges and their urgency to address those challenges, ideally with our product, more front and center. All right. So let me go into the setup. This is going to be a little weird, but the objective here is to give you a couple of role plays, which we recorded a couple of months ago. So you'll hear some weird seasons references. Just ignore those. Just to give you some examples of AEs. They're both me. So one of them's, well, you make the decision. Give you an example of how some calls might go. They're highly compressed. So, just in the interest of time, I'll take you through those. But fundamentally, this is really what we can expect out of sort of upping our discovery game. To me, it's leveraging our sellers' time, right? Qualifying in or out faster, developing that curiosity and rapport, and accelerating our wins. So with that, let me go to the first role play. So let me flip over to that and start it right away. I'm Kiran. I'm an AE with Great Software Systems. We make collaboration tools for marketing teams.
Hey, Kiran, I'm Danny. I'm from Workbench Technologies. It's really great to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, you too, Danny. Where are you based?
I'm here in New York City. What about yourself?
Not too far from you. I'm out in suburbs of suburban New Jersey. So yeah, luckily it's nice weather out there today. So gonna have to go out and rake leaves pretty soon. So curious, what prompted you to book the meeting with us?
Yeah, I got one of your marketing emails and the product was really interesting. So I thought it'd be great to get a demo of your collaboration tools.
Awesome. Let me share my screen real quickly. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, well, I'm bringing that up. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and your role?
Yeah, certainly. So basically, Workbench Technologies make software tools for different engineering departments to help them track bugs more easily. I'm in the marketing department and I help our product and engineering teams with developer documentation and content up on our website. I'm kind of scanning the market right now to see what tools are out there, and yours really stood out.
Excellent. Well, that's definitely our specialty, and I'm glad our marketing emails work. That's fantastic. We can definitely help you guys there. So we've got 30 minutes, and let me just sort of dive right into it. So GSS makes some fantastic collaboration tools for marketers, making it easy for marketing and sales team to collaborate and align on stuff that they need to sell in Salesforce. Same with product to build out data sheets and content, but also engineering teams that might be posting developer content on their docs pages. Let me, in fact, bring up a product overview slide deck. Just give me a second here. Okay, so just wrapping up the deck. Danny, does that make any sense? Any questions for you or that you might have about us?
Yeah, it made sense. Can you show me the product?
Yeah, let me do that. Give me a second here. Let me switch tabs. It's in another browser window. Oops, sorry for sharing my Slack. Give me a second. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Great. So this is our main landing page with a menu of actions on the left-hand pane. Let me go ahead and walk you through that. Okay, so wrapping up, I've gotten a chance to show you all of the elements of our product and all the elements on the left-hand pane and what they all do. Any questions that you might have?
No, I think I just wanted to get a sense of what the customer collaboration product was. I think I'm all good.
Okay, let me actually go to that page. That's over here on this tab. So let me dive in specifically into the collaboration features between marketing and product management. Okay, yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but I have another meeting. You think you can email me some materials and I'll read them, ping you, and we can go from there?
Yeah, sorry about running over on the time. Absolutely. I've got your email address. I'll definitely send you some materials. I'd love to get on another call with you to learn a little bit more about you and your company and what you're really looking for. Could we get some time maybe in the next week or so?
Yeah, the next few weeks are pretty busy actually, but maybe we can chat towards the end of November.
Okay. All right. I'll send you an email and we'll lock up a time then. All right. Thank you. Okay. I had to stop that one a little bit early because it was painful to watch. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about this. And I've sort of summarized what my observations were of Kiran, the AE, on this call. Yeah, and but if you have observations about what he could have done better or differently, by all means, put them in the chat. But So let me just see here. So, oh, sorry about that. Here we go. So the number one thing I think is, yeah, somebody said more authentic rapport building for sure. Kiran kind of just went right in. We've all been guilty of that sometimes, but we didn't build a lot of rapport. He did ask the question about why, why did he take the call? Danny gave a couple of clues, but we didn't really pull at them. So we didn't really create any conversational rapport at the beginning. We really didn't get anything about his role. And we kind of dove right into the product. So in my experience, screen sharing of the product, even the slide deck, frankly, is diving right into that within the first few minutes. Creates a tension, and it creates an unbalance or sort of an imbalance between the prospect and what you're trying to achieve, right? They agreed to share their time to take the meeting, but we didn't do our work to try to understand what he cares about, exactly like someone said on the chat, right? So we talked about product capabilities, but we really didn't zero in on any outcomes. Another thing that we didn't do in terms of driving, and one of the things that I think really drives urgency, is we didn't really talk about proof points or references or other outcomes that we have done with respect to that prospect. A little bit of a pet peeve. I accidentally shared my Slack, which is usually a bad thing to do, almost always. But ultimately, we didn't take advantage of the time with Danny to uncover what were his challenges, what were his interest areas, and why fundamentally he booked the meeting with us to see the product. But I think, the folks on the chat, I think you've nailed exactly the points. Let's take another example of a demo script as well, and you'll get to hear me doing this one more time, hopefully better. Let's start that one. Hey, Kiran, thanks for reaching out to us. My name is Kiran, and I'm an AE with Great Software Systems.
Oh, hi, yeah, I'm Kira from Workbench Technologies. I'm on the marketing team here. It's so interesting to see someone with such a similar name to me pop up on my email.
Yeah, I was also surprised. Where are you based?
I'm in Hoboken, but our office is actually in Flatiron, New York.
Oh, it's a great area. I'm actually out in New Jersey as well, but a little farther west of you, I think. So, but look, it's great to meet you. Thanks for taking the call. We've got 30 minutes, and in that time, what I was hoping to do is give you a brief summary of us. But I'd also love to learn more about what piqued your interest in reaching out, share some info about our product, and based on that, we can sort of see if there's a good enough fit to get some more time on the calendar. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Let me give you a brief intro. So we make collaboration software tools for marketing and product teams, and more than 50 companies such as ABC Group are using us every single day to eliminate errors on their product documentation and their developer content. So that's us in a nutshell.
Nice. ABC uses you guys?
Yeah, they've been using us for ages, and they really love the product. The CMO has done a number of events with us, so they're really happy with it. But actually, I'm curious, what prompted you to book the meeting?
Yeah, so I actually got one of your marketing emails, and the product looked interesting, so I thought it would just be a good idea to get a demo from you guys.
Okay, cool. Look, I'd love to take you through the product. Oh, hey, I happened to notice, looking at your profile, that you used to work over at Zanzibar. I actually know Phoebe over there really well, and in fact, they just switched to GSS a couple months ago.
Oh, great. Yeah, I know Phoebe really well. She's great. But basically, just for some context, WB Technologies, we make software tools for engineering departments to help them track bugs more easily. And as part of the marketing team there, I help our product and eng teams get developer docs and content up on the website. And so I'm kind of just scanning the market right now to look for tools to help us do that right now.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks for that background. So you mentioned getting developer docs up on your website. Have you run into any challenges with that process recently?
Actually, yes. So the VP of engineering at one of our biggest customers complained to our CEO just a few months ago that there were some errors on the doc page which caused some problems on her end, and that was a big support issue for them. So yeah, we got in some hot water there.
Interesting. So I can imagine that must have been a tough situation. So what in your mind led to those errors cropping up? And I guess I'm also curious about how you currently do this process.
Yeah, so it's super manual right now. It's all done in Google Docs and Google Sheets. So me and the engineering team and the product team, we just pretty much go in and update the docs as done in those G Sheets. And then marketing never really knows, if the content has been specifically reviewed and approved for accuracy. We just kind of sort of trust that it's done right.
Okay, so that manual process is not uncommon. We hear that a lot. But I guess what I'm hearing is that there's no way of validating that engineering has read or approved any of new content that you guys have written. So you just sort of think that it's good to publish. Is that how those errors you mentioned got into the dev portal?
Yeah, that's right.
I got it. Okay, so that's very helpful context. So given this happened, sounds like a few months ago, what else have you guys tried out to sort of address this process?
Yeah, we tried to build some workflow automation, but so far it hasn't really solved the problem, which is one of the reasons I'm talking to you guys.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm certainly glad you reached out. So do you have a sense of why what you built didn't work?
Yeah, we really couldn't find a way of automating it so that engineering could read and then sign off on the specific updated content. That's what we couldn't get to work.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that's, again, a very common thing we hear as well. Are you looking at any other tools, software tools besides GSS?
Yeah, so we're looking at some other workflow tools that we could configure to do the job, and then also ServiceNow and like one or two other tools.
Great, thank you for that context here. That's helpful. So I think we can solve your problem. In fact, at ABC, I mentioned them earlier, they had a very similar situation, though they didn't have the same issue you guys had with your customer. But within 30 days of rolling us out, they were able to automate that whole process, even the parts that you said you were having challenges with. They eliminated 99.9% of their doc errors, and they reduced the time to post new content by 3 weeks on average. So that was a big savings for them. In fact, they ended up saving a full FTE that they were able to redeploy onto other more strategic stuff. And I was just talking to Phoebe, and in 2 years, they've not had one issue where errors have been spotted by customers. So that's obviously a good outcome for them. But look, I think we're 20 minutes in, and while I could definitely flip over to go into the product in a little bit more detail, I'd rather not rush it. So I think instead, maybe we should set up a second meeting where we go a little more detail on your challenges, but I can also give you a more in-depth demo of the product. Now, I'll definitely bring in one of our solution experts. In fact, she was on the project at ABC, can take you through the product. And I think they're a similar space to you, so it may be a relevant conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay. So if you do decide to invest in a tool like ours, who else would be involved in that decision? And, if so, does it make sense to bring them to the meeting?
Yeah, so decision makers would be Sally, who's our CMO and my boss, and then also Hector, who's our head of product. They'd need to get comfortable with it because their teams would be using it as well. But they kind of gave me the reins to figure this out on my own. So I'd probably just invite one of our other product folks, Suzanne, to join.
Okay, good. Let's take a look at our calendars. How does your schedule look? It's obviously Wednesday. How does your schedule look Friday or Monday?
Yeah, I'm free all of Friday morning.
Okay, let's do 10 a.m. I just sent you an invite with a Zoom. If you want, add Suzanne on your end. Is that okay?
Yeah, I can go ahead and add her.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks for your time today. And it was great that you were able to share some of these challenges you're facing. So I'm pretty confident we can help you address them. Looking forward to the session next week very much. So quick question before we drop. Ideally, if this looks like it's a fit, when would you want a capability like this to be live and in production?
Yeah, this is super high priority for us right now. So by the end of the fiscal year, which is January 31st for us, ideally, we'd like to have a solution up and running by then.
Fantastic. All right, great. Thanks so much for your time. And we are all set to meet up. Okay. Cool. So I think it's fair to say that the AE Kiran did a little bit better job on this session. Any thoughts on this one? And I apologies, I have not had a chance to read the Zoom chat. I'm happy to review those in a second. And Jess, if any of those came up.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think one interesting thread that folks have pointed out is how do we make it so that's a conversation and it's not an interrogation, right? And then there's another great question, which is like, look, if I was a customer, I would just want to either see the product or I'd want a direct answer to my question. Why would I buy your tools and not the competitors? I wouldn't want to spend a whole meeting answering questions and end up scheduling another call. So those are a few other scenarios that come up.
Yeah, those are great questions. So, and I think we can sort of cover them in the next couple slides. So I would say, so the first thing about is that the AE tried to establish some reference customers that, based on some research he did, were similar, that he knew would resonate with Kira, and found that connection. I think one of the things that is, at least in my experience, that make it easier to turn it into more of a conversation is by that establishment of trust and credibility. Like, oh, hey, this, he or she may know what they're talking about because they work with similar organizations to me. So, let me be a little bit more open to sharing information. I think that's definitely, it's a difficult challenge, and it's I'm going to talk a lot about this in a few minutes, about how can we drive a more, omnidirectional conversation as opposed to it feeling like an interrogation, because there's a very, very fine line there. So I think, and I think the key point somebody else made in the chat is that this AE tried to make it a dialogue, but setting the prospect up early on to make them comfortable in having a conversation is a skill that takes time to build. And, obviously I think it's a real critical one, but fundamentally what I think this AE did better this time is he, again, leveraged a similar reference study, but he also talked about business outcomes with respect to what that customer's challenge was, related back to an outcome from a real customer, right? He drove more of a back and forth dialogue about why they're suffering the pain. And it's not always going to work out this way, folks, but, in the first call, he uncovered, okay, they actually do have a business urgency to this, and they've tried something, which I'm going to talk a little bit about as an urgency signal. They've tried something to solve it. They put people and or capital against trying to solve it, but it didn't quite hit the mark. So they're open to other approaches because of the urgency of the problem. And I think generally speaking, that is a really key aspect of why this discovery capability in terms of uncovering these challenges early on is really so critical. Because as I've done this call a couple of times, one of the other folks on a prior call said, it sets the tone for the rest of the sales engagement if we can do this right. I want to touch on one point, and that is when we can describe credibility with either really good outcomes with similar customers or product capabilities, which may involve a demo, we're actually amplifying their urgency to act, because now we're letting the customer know that, there is a way to address this challenge. We thought we'd have to build it, use Google Sheets. We thought we'd have to do it, all these other manual approaches, put people against it. But if there are tools that are addressing this challenge, maybe I can put some resources behind this and start to work on pursuing this opportunity. So what else could he have done better? Well, one question that he didn't ask was, what happens if you don't solve this issue, right? Another question that is often helpful, and these may not come up in the first call. Let's just be very clear here. But what does success look like for you, Mr. or Ms. Customer, right? And also, how far along are they with looking at the other tools? She mentioned looking at a few other vendors. It would have been good to know. And again, maybe not on this call, but maybe on the next one, how far are they gone with it? Maybe they're doing a POC with another vendor, and now we're all of a sudden in the back seat as opposed to the front seat driving it. So those are some of the I think the learnings that we can take. So let's kind of segue. Jess, are there any other questions I should address before I dive into the next section?
I think you'll actually cover a lot. So let's get through these next few slides, and then anything that we haven't covered, we'll leave room.
Yeah, sounds good. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about now is it's just a framework, right? So I'd encourage you to think about it as such. But what I've sort of done in practice over the years, and have worked pretty closely with other companies on, is really thinking about these 5 key pieces. And they can apply to all calls, not necessarily just the first call. And I think that level of discipline and execution is appreciated by the prospect. It shows a level of professionalism and comfort with our subject matter and with working with them in a consultative way. And I'll talk about each one of these in turn in a little bit more detail, but I believe genuine curiosity, and I touched on this at the beginning, plus a very clear respect for your prospect are key ingredients to building good rapport with the prospect. I also feel that providing a level of credibility with comfort with customers that are similar to this organization or outcomes that your product can engender, and your command of them as a seller, even if you're at the early stages and just maybe you're doing the business development work or the BDR work and setting the stage, even at that level of earliness, it helps set the stage to uncover, but also amplify their urgency, because again, you lead them to the belief that there's a solution to their challenges they may not know about. I believe knowledge of the customer is mission critical if you are facing customers and prospects. Knowledge of the product and how it helps your current customers is absolute table stakes. So knowing product capabilities is great. Every one of us should know our product as well as we possibly can, or our service offering, whatever it may be. But knowing specifically the intersection between what our product does and what kind of outcomes it engenders with our customers, right down to the specific customer names and roles, is where you can start to weave those in conversationally, and you won't even know it after a while, but each one of those is a little pop in the mind of the customer, and they actually now are building more curiosity and they want to learn. So these components feed off of one another. There's high degree of overlap between each of these, but I think all very mission critical. The why is really important, and obviously that's why we're on this call, right? But it's our ability to set the stage for a bi-directional flow of information, and then knowing when to sort of pivot or move the conversation based upon signals that we hear are really the foundation for we're not going to win it all the time, but a deal that we're more likely to win. And then last piece is execution. And with respect to execution, what I mean is the prep beforehand, the logistics and managing of it, the managing of the flow during the call. You saw in the first role play, I just ate up all the time because I was not paying attention to the clock. I was not paying attention to what the prospect wanted to get out of it. And I missed my opportunity. And maybe that opportunity won't come back because I didn't manage the execution. But also after the call, if there's an action item or a set of them, really making sure that we drive those as well. I'm going to just talk through this. There's a lot of data points on this screen. I don't want to go into too many details, but I do want to pull out a couple of them, right? Knowing the buyer's background and role, and I'm going to talk about pre-call planning in a minute. Knowing about their background and role. In the second call, I noticed, I did a LinkedIn research on Kira. I found that she was connected. Again, this is pure luck. It's not always going to happen, very, very infrequently, but I found a connection with one of our customers. And as soon as we can find that, boom, that's another element to amplify our own credibility within the organization, right? We also have the ability to, better use the time when we're sitting in front of them, because we can now use the first couple of minutes to just build a little bit more easy rapport, and that goes sort of eons for us. I want to pull out a couple of other ones here that I think are really important, but one of the things that I see a lot is the intros tend to be a little bit long. It's great that you've got 20 years of practitioner experience in your industry sector. Try not to read it out as a resume, because it's more impactful when it comes out in your questions and when it comes out in your descriptions of why, maybe if you're a co-founder, why you built the product, right? And how you sort of got to that, because that allows us to better execute and manage the clock. So generally speaking, I've tried to divide these based upon sort of before the call, on the call, and post-call and wrap up. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the stuff that can really tee you up for success. I'm a big believer in the pre-call planning and research. you might think that, well, wait, this, Jane Doe she just booked a demo with us, and the demo is starting in an hour. I would make a note for your marketing team and you to work together to build in a buffer between the time that a customer can book or prospect can book a demo on your website and the time it actually happens. Let them calendarize it live and digitally, but build in a 24 to 48 hour buffer before the meeting occurs so that you have time to do this work, because it will pay you back in dividends if you do that. So how did the meeting come to us? Was it a demo request? Did we get to them through marketing outreach or a poll? Did one of our BDRs or AE cold call into them? Was it a referral from one of our VCs? Or have we actually worked with this company in the past, right? Help me understand what are the people that are involved in this, and do we have any peripheral or direct connections to them, either directly or through customers? And then on the company side, how good of a fit are they to us? We hopefully have an ideal customer profile defined. Does this buying organization fit it, both from the company level as well as the persona and role level? We might be talking to an organization we'd ideally like to sell to, but the individual may not be the best fit for our early conversations. Maybe they're not a sort of buying entity. Similarly, to what degree can we get signals from marketing with respect to how this prospect or this company has engaged with our marketing content? Have they attended any of our webinars? Have they opened any of our emails? Have they engaged? Have they filled out forms? Have they done anything that indicates some level of sort of heat with respect to their interest? And if they booked a meeting with us, 4 days out, has there been a flurry of visits to our webpage after that as well? And I think one that's very, very important is what's the similarity with this organization with respect to our other customers? So I think those can really, if we gather that intel, and if we set it up well, this shouldn't take us very long at all. And I think that this is a dance between the BDR and the AE. It could be the AE doing it, could be the BDR teeing it up for the AE. Every organization's different, but there's got to be somebody who's sort of accountable for really gathering this information. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about urgency drivers. And those of you who have done spin or solution selling or all the other solution, sales methodologies will recognize a version of this. And that is, every organization that you engage with is at a different level of urgency with respect to the problem that your product could potentially solve for them. They may not even, they may be suffering from the pain, but they've sort of, set themselves aside to in terms of we've rationalized we can't solve this problem. But then something happens, and to Kira, in her example, she said, "Oh, we had a problem, and customer complaint resulted in them realizing they had a problem." Guess what? It became a lot more urgent, right? So as customers sort of move up this y-axis of urgency, I want sellers to recognize that they have an influence into how we can move customers up this. A big part of it is when we get to the right person and we're able to really uncover what problem they're trying to solve and why, and we can map it to similar organizations that we've been able to help. In many cases, we may be able to move them up in the urgency level. And I think that that's an important point. But when marketing organizations think about where to engage with these organizations, ideally we want to engage with them when they're at this sort of level where they know that there's a problem, but they don't yet know how to solve it, but they're very open to looking at approaches to solving the problem so that we can educate them and move them up the urgency in our world, as opposed to having a competitor educate them, and then we go, "Oh shoot, we've got an RFP, we've got to answer it. How do we answer it?" Right? The more we can set the ground and move them up in consistence with our capabilities, then the more likely we'll have control over that sales cycle. I get asked a lot when working with companies, how do we know how to sense the urgency of a prospect to take action when there is a pain? This is not, by no means is this an exhaustive list, but this can give you an idea of some of the signals that you can listen for or look for during your call or calls with the prospect, and probably make an educated guess as to whether they will take action or not. The top one is, if we've been able to uncover the not solving this pain has a business impact, going back to Kira's call, the second one, there was a pretty clear impact of this, right? A one that I really put a lot of emphasis on is the organization you're talking to deploying capital against solving it? And this is a very important definition to clarify. Deploying capital against it means they're putting people, or they bought tools. Even if they've owned the tools and they're just trying to try them out, that means that this is urgent enough for them to solve, and they will likely be open to potentially spending money with you if you can demonstrate that you can do it better, especially if those solutions that they've deployed didn't work. And I try to ask that in the second call, like, why exactly didn't your manual approach work? Obviously, if there's visibility at the senior levels within the organization and participation, and if we have gathered what I like to call a clear or else mandate, like I got to do this or else, and they can describe it, then I would deem that organization to be much higher likely to take an action. And the phrase I like to use, and those of you who know me, you've heard this phrase a lot, they can limp along or they can't limp along with what they have. And in Kira's example, in the second call, they couldn't limp along. It wasn't working. It was still, they were still at risk of creating more customer churn if they didn't address it. So again, this is not a guarantee, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I found this has often been very helpful for us sort of assessing what is the likelihood of this organization to take action here. And I think it's an important consideration. Let's continue. I want to leave some time for questions at the end. So one of the things that I mentioned, and I won't belabor the point here, is that we as sellers have to be very good at listening for and pulling at little threads or nuggets or clues. What do I mean by that? If you get a prospect on the phone or in a demo meeting or what have you, and you are good at and timely at asking questions or clarifying questions, you'll hear nuggets. And occasionally the nugget is going to be, oh yeah, it takes us so long to do this. Oh, I have 5 people that are dedicated to this, or it's complex, or they use words like that are clues. We have to know when to pull at those threads and when to stop. To the point of somebody on the chat, we don't want it to be an interrogation. We want it to feel flowing and natural. But if we can get a couple of those pulled out, then we might get an example of urgency that now we see why this customer's talking to us. We can then set up a demo that's specific to that problem instead of a generic demo like what Bad AE Kiran did in the first session, right? So here's some examples just for you to think about, right? If the customer or the prospect says, it takes my team a long time to do X, right? I might say, well, you mentioned that. Can you elaborate that on a little bit? Or what is really contributing to that duration? Why is it taking so long, right? And, they may explain something, and I think it's reasonable for you to pull at that thread a little bit more and ask a follow-on question. I think we all intuitively know when too much is too much. So we have to know, like, okay, we're eating into the customer's meeting time. We've spent 25 to the 30 minutes asking questions. They're going to get annoyed. So we obviously have to know about that. And related to that, I want to spend a few minutes on call dynamics and flow, and then we can wrap up. There are incredible tools that did not exist when I was a direct, a quoted carrying, bag carrying seller, like Gong and Chorus and some of these other tools, which are phenomenal at helping us self-assess and improve ourselves continuously. I love the features of being able to look at talk time. We may be monologuing. I love quoting The Incredibles. We might be monologuing and we just don't know it, right? But if you look at this call here, we might have gotten some initial stuff from the prospect, intros, hellos, oh, where are you based? I'm in New Jersey, blah, blah, blah. But this is a monologue. And obviously the time scale is not visible here, but if that's 5, 10, 15 minutes in a 30-minute meeting, we may have lost a window to discover if we do that, right? So if, and again, this is just my rule of thumb, but it's different for everybody. At least in those first 15 minutes or the first part of your first call, if you're talking more than 50% of the time, then you're missing the mark. You may be missing signals or clues that you may not get. So I think it's really important to think about it in that regard, right? So and look at your old calls and look at the recordings and visually assess the flow. Ideally, it looks more like this, right? Where the AE maybe spends a little bit of time. SE might be on there, or the SDR, but the prospect is talking a lot and there's back and forth. Maybe I asked a question. One of the sales reps I work with a lot, he loves asking what piqued your interest. It's a great question to ask, and it may lead to a whole bunch of other questions as well. But you can see this back and forth, and now all of a sudden we might leave the same time window, 15 to 30 minutes, with a whole bunch more information about why they talked to us, why they reached out, why they asked for a product demo, why they're interested in looking at solutions. And if we can uncover that and manage the call flow accordingly, then I think we're setting ourselves up for a more likely, winnable opportunity. And that is it. Let me just stop there for a minute and ask if there are any questions from the audience. And Jess, I have not been looking at the chat, but if you have,
yes, there are many questions and many good questions. So I think this first one had come up a little bit, and you might have touched on it, but I think folks are really curious. Should you always show a deck in your first call? Should you not always demo? Like what, again, your mileage may vary, right? But what's your general thought process?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if the meeting was set up where the customer went to the website and clicked demo request, there's an unspoken contract between them and you. They are expecting a product demo. And I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, but the customer's expectations are, I want to see the product. That's why you have a button up there, and that's why I chose to click it. In that scenario, I think it's really important to create the space, both in time as well as the ability to reach out to them and say, hey, in order, Mr. and Ms. Customer, for this demo to go as well as possible, for it to answer your questions, I would love to have 5 minutes with you on the phone beforehand. Or, just FYI, I would love to be able to ask you a few key questions right at the top of the demo session so that I could contextualize it better for you. I think they'll respect that, generally speaking, unless they're a competitor, in which case they won't. And I think that is important, because you're saying to them, look, your use of our product is more important than me talking about my product. I want to make sure that you're a good fit for me. I don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste my time. So I think that's a respectful way to do it. If it was set up by the BDR or the AE as a sort of a direct first kind of call, I think the more expectation will be that it'll be discovery in nature, and the prospect should be expecting to answer some questions. If it helps you to ground your description of your product and its outcomes, like what I did in the first few minutes of the second demo, by using a couple of slides to anchor, absolutely, that's fine. Especially if they describe outcomes relevant to the prospect. If it's generic slides where, let me tell you about the history of why we founded, and it takes 20 minutes to go through, I wouldn't do that. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of my guidance on that.
Yeah. And this is a good follow-up. In demos, when we go through our product in depth, let's assume you've kind of gone through the discovery, you're actually showing the demo. How do you balance the asking questions versus talk times, right? When you actually show a demo? It's
a great question. I love when I see sellers doing demos that are actually interactive. Like, let me show you that feature, Mr. and Ms. Customer. By the way, while I'm teeing that page up, how do you guys do this today? Right. Or I might say, one of the things that one of our customers similar to you really loved is this feature. That second point is really important, because too often our demos are a top to bottom, left to right, tiptoe through the daisies of every clickable asset in the UI. We don't want to do that, because the buyer might only care about two things that will solve their problem tomorrow. And if we've uncovered that, let's just go straight to that. And then we can talk about the other stuff later. The demo then becomes shorter, but also more impactful.
That's great. You talk a lot about tying things back to, customer stories, right? Other reference points. As you know, though, for many early stage companies, those reference points can be limited. Do you have any other pro tips on how to, share outcomes, even if they're limited?
Yeah, and it's a great point. Early stage companies, you may not have the authority to proactively or publicly mention customer XYZ as a user of your product. If it's relevant to the prospect you're talking to, you can absolutely say, look, we work with one of the largest organizations very similar to you in their go-to-market and business model or product offerings, and they're using the product in this way in this group. And later on, as we work closely with you, if it becomes possible, we would love to connect you with them as a reference. So that's sort of planting a future seed. A, that you've got a production reference. B, that they're happy to talk to prospects, which also means that they're happy with the product. So that's one strategy that you can use. But the best answer is, can we as an early stage company go to all of our customers and say, look, I need to be able to talk about you. You are my, you're why I exist. Can we please come to some agreement about our ability to at least reference you as a customer in presentations with prospects, even if I'm not going to put you up on the website yet, or even if I'm not going to get a case study yet? Or can I work with you on internal facing case study to educate my sellers so they can talk about you anonymously, but with detail in terms of the outcome? So those are the two things I would suggest.
That's awesome. There was also an interesting thread on asking for budget on the first call. I know you asked for decision maker, which is helpful. How do you think about asking for budget?
Sometimes it's best to just ask, but like on the second call, I didn't have to ask because she said it was highest priority. They're already looking at our competitors. It's likely they're ready to spend money to address that challenge. But if you don't get, that was a trifecta of a great demo, right? A great first call. They're not always going to go like that. I think if you've uncovered the challenge and you've uncovered that they need to make a change, and you have uncovered some time frame, then it's a natural follow-on question to say, have you allocated funding for this initiative? I don't like asking the question budget, because budget is a very fixed annual cycle that, we set our budget last year for this year. And if you ask about a budget, then you're thinking about next year. What you want to ask is, does this project have funding? Right.
I love that.
That would be sort of the way I would think about that.
Yeah, that's such a important nuance, and I hope everyone caught that. There was a question around an interesting point, which is what happens when your customer doesn't know what they want, right? You had asked very targeted questions. Kira was obviously in a pretty late stage of, process, knew the things they're looking for. But what if they don't know?
Yeah, if they don't know, then they're most likely at this level, right? Meaning they know they have a problem. So let's assume that we've uncovered that they have a challenge that they need to address in whatever area, or that they can't articulate it really well. Like, yeah, we actually don't know exactly where the problem is. We think it's here or here. It may not be a qualified opportunity for us. They may be too early for us. They may be down at level 1 where they can only describe the problem, but they can't even think about how to describe it. They just think, well, I'm going to hire 5 more people, which is actually a solution. It's not the best one, especially in this economy. But I would say that there may be ways for us to nurture that organization through reference stories, through other marketing resources, and it may not be worth the seller's time at that point to engage with them. But I think we've got to get really good at understanding our outcomes specific to the product that we sell, that they engender, and being able to grade a prospect just by virtue of ideally the first call, sort of where they fit in this sort of the continuum. And we may make the unfortunate decision that these guys aren't ready for us yet. I don't know if
which is a key part of it, right? I mean, again, not everything should move forward. I think getting to a know or getting to understanding this person's, this prospect is not a good fit for us is also hugely, huge progress.
Yeah. And I just saw a chat on the question on the chat in terms of a lot of different sessions and trying to find use cases. I think it's important for us as the product owners or the company that owns the product, the sellers, the marketers, sales engineers, founders especially, to zero in on known use cases where you can solve a problem. If you're a seed stage or a Series A stage company and you have 5, 10, 15, 20 customers, taking the time to understand the commonalities between them and tease out some things that could be repeatable can help you to zero in on functions, departments, lines of businesses, roles within an organization that are more likely to tee up pain that you can address. Why? Because you've solved it before for somebody else that looks similar. It's no guarantee, but it is a way to help limit the number of just sort of spray and pray conversations that you have. That means really knowing, describing it to a T. Why do we exist as a company? What problems are we solving? Why does our buying audience need to solve these problems? Why do we do it better than the other ways they could do it? And can we prove it? And if you can answer those questions, then you can minimize a lot of these sort of conversations that go in a lot of different directions. They're still going to happen, but ideally your ability to sort of pivot them into those will up your win odds.
Awesome. One last, just very tactical one. How long do you recommend the first call to be? 30 minutes, 45 minutes? What's the general rule of thumb?
Yeah, it's a good question. I honestly, I think it really varies. I mean, some industries are very starved for attention. If you're selling to the finance folks, they don't get a lot of calls as CISOs do. CISOs don't have 30 minutes. They might have 15 minutes, right? And again, that's just a generalization and kind of in jest, but I don't think there's any reason why a 30-minute first meeting is not a doable thing by a prospect. Obviously, if they're the CFO, if they're the CEO, if they're a fellow co-founder, if they're a VP, whatever the title, the more senior, the less time they have. But if it was a demo request, I think 30 minutes is usually sufficient. But it's how you use that time that I think is most critical, and establishing a foundation for why, asking a few well-placed questions, to somebody's point, not barraging them with an interrogation, but just a few well-placed questions to test their openness to speak and converse, and then get to the product. And but at least now you'll have the ability to sort of contextualize the product and why they've reached out. But I think as a rule of thumb, that's probably good.
Awesome. Well, Kiran, thank you so much for this epic masterclass. It obviously flew by and we could spend hours still chatting with you. I do think the questions in the chat, thank you everyone so much for them. There's going to be many more follow-up workshops if we have anything to do with it. And I'm sure many of you feel like this too, but Kiran makes everything sound very easy and effortless. And so our goal is to make all of you as successful and smooth in sales as Kiran. We will be, again, posting this recording and entire playbook online. So make sure you're signed up on our Enterprise Weekly newsletter to receive. On this slide, if you are a pre-seed or seed stage enterprise startup and would like to chat through how to think about go-to-market, getting this engine flywheel going, we here on the Workbench team are very happy to chat as well. So reach out to us at vc@workbench.com. And then lastly, I know there were a few questions about marketing. If you thought today's masterclass on sales was helpful, chances are your mind is also thinking about marketing and the tactical things you can do to build a marketing and customer acquisition engine. So on Wednesday, February 22nd, we have Ryan Narad, head of marketing at Mutiny, leading a masterclass on how to build a scalable acquisition engine for customers. So just dropped a Zoom link in our chat for you to sign up. We'll also be sending that out as well. And so with that, thank you so much again, Kiran. That was so terrific and so helpful. And thank you to all of you for joining, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.